Welcome back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, here part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And if you thought Mark Melancon blew the first game of the series to the Houston Astros, you've come to the right place because we're discussing that game next.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Millard Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks still here. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account, or just look up Locked On Diamondbacks on both Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first to listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. But on today's pod, as I said, we're going to discuss the first game of the series to the Houston Astros, the loss to the Houston Astros. Then we're going to preview game 2 of the series in segment number 2. And then we're going to wrap up the pod by discussing, is Mike Hazen a good GM when it comes to trades? Is he actually a good trade guy? Is he a good negotiator? We're actually going to look back at Mike Hazen's trade history and actually discuss if he's actually good at making deals with other teams and if he comes out more of a winner or a loser on the deals he makes. But let's first start with last night's game, because speaking of losers, and full honesty, I'm recording this at 10:30 p.m. on a Tuesday right after the game because I want to give you guys the best podcast possible. So let's talk about the post-cast pod, the post-game pod, whatever you want to call it, because listen. I absolutely loved the signing of Mark Melancon when it happened. Everyone was like, I don't know if everyone, but at least I was like, yo, Mark the Shark Melancon, we got him. We needed a back-end reliever. We've needed a closer. The D-backs have been very sucky at closing games, and we stole him from an NL West rival, the San Diego Padres. I was all in on the Mark Melancon move. I was also all in on the Ian Kennedy move, and Ian Kennedy looked great today. Both of Mark Melancon and Ian Kennedy struggled in Saturday in their debuts for 2022. Ian Kennedy had a great bounce back tonight, but the same cannot be said for Mark Melancon, who started out looking really good. That cutter he had, that curveball, it was all working for him until he decided to turn into Zach Davies when he had 2 outs on the board, because I don't know what happened, but Mark Melancon all of a sudden decided to crap the bed once he had 2 outs, because this was a 1-1 game entering the 9th. Mark Melancon was cruising, then 2 outs come, and it's like, this is a different pitcher on the mound because it gives up a double to Siri. And look, I thought it could have been maybe just a long single, but there was no chance Pavin Smith was throwing him out at second. If that was Jake McCarthy in right field, I think there was a chance for a play to be made at second base, but Pavin Smith, he had no chance on Siri. I think Siri knew, because as soon as he hit that ball to Pavin Smith, he was getting ready to round second. He was taking the long stride around first base. So I think as soon as he smoked that ball, he knew he was going to second with the outfielder out in right field. But then Mark Melancon walks Jose Altuve, and then Brent Strom comes out, gives a quick pep talk, because remember, Brent Strom is coming from the Houston Astros. Who's up next? Michael Brantley. He should know, everything about Michael Brantley and what he's good and not good at. Well, it seems like Mark Melancon didn't listen, because he gives up a hit to Michael Brantley, which is the go-ahead hit. The Astros take a 2-1 lead, and that was all they needed to win the game, because in the 9th inning, there was a whole lot of nothing for the D-backs. Now, we did get a Seth Beer hit who led off the inning with a single, so we know Seth Beer has the clutch gene. We know if he comes up late in the game, high leverage moment, this guy has a chance to do damage. So anytime comes in late in the game, I think all D-backs fans are now going to believe this game has a chance to be changed or saved depending on the outcome. But after Seth Beer, whole lot of nothing from the D-backs offense, like a whole lot of nothing the whole night from the D-backs offense. But let's talk a little bit about the starting pitching because Madison Bumgarner did have himself a good game. I thought he looked a lot better than last time. That first start was very shaky. I mean, I don't think I would categorize his first start as a good start, despite only giving up one run over 4 innings. Well, he gave up 1 run over 5 innings tonight, but he just looked a lot better on the mound. He increased his strike percentage from 54% to 61%. His command seemed a lot better. Yes, he gave up some hard contact. Yes, he gave up 1 solo dolo shot, but he wasn't wild up there. He wasn't all over the strike zone. Whenever he missed close. He wasn't leaving a whole lot of balls just hanging over the middle of the plate. So I thought he looked a lot better up there on the mound. Now, he still hasn't really been able to Madison Bumgarner still hasn't been able to really ramp up the swings and misses, get the put away stuff. He hasn't really been able to rack up the strikeouts just yet, but that might come as the season moves on and his arm gets a little bit stronger because we all know Madison Bumgarner starts the season slow and then usually gets better as the season wears on. Usually around All-Star break is where Madison Bumgarner usually likes to take off, and hopefully with Brent Strom there, it's even easier, maybe quicker for Madison Bumgarner to get his sea legs under him. But overall, I thought it was a really good start by him and an encouraging start. So I'm very curious to see how he pitches the next time through. He did get into a little trouble in the 6th inning with the leadoff double, then walks the next dude because he was just being overly cautious, got himself in a little bit of a jam, 2 on, no outs. But the bullpen outside of Mark Melancon was shut down tonight. Noah Ramirez came in and got out of that jam for Madison Bumgarner, helped him out. Jose Herrera also helped out Madison Bumgarner during that sequence because he made that insane diving play. He also threw out a dude trying to steal second. Like, Herrera made some incredible defensive plays. He also had some good at-bats as well, drawing walks. So Carson Kelly better watch out because he did pinch hit in this game, and he is now 0 for 12 on the season. I think Herrera is trying to make a run at his job, at least for this early part of the year. I think we all know Carson Kelly is going to be the catcher full-time, but at least in this early part with Carson Kelly struggling, if Herrera is making defensive plays like that, you know Torey Lovello's hitting him with them attaboy and wants to desperately keep him in the lineup because he is all about defense. So Herrera is making his name known to Torey Lovello with those incredible defensive plays, but that's all you can really say about this game. Very good pitching, starting and relief outside Mark Melancon. Very good defense, but offense, once again, not there. We did see a Christian Walker home run, which would have been a home run in all 30 ballparks. This is someone that smoked baseballs in 2019 and 2020. Was among the league leaders on the D-backs in terms of hard hit percentage and things like that, in terms of hard contact rates. Christian Walker was always at the top of the leaderboard for the D-backs and really around Major League Baseball. So he struggled last year. Injuries and other reasons played a part into it. So it's nice to see he already has 2 home runs in the first week of the season. Dalton Varsho got his first hit of the season as well. But overall, not a great offensive game like the entire season. I think the D-backs actually raised their average after this game. I mean, they got 4 hits tonight. That has to be a season high. I haven't looked into the most hits that they've gotten a game yet, but I'm pretty sure 4 hits is probably a season high. And if not, the 4 hits tonight definitely raised the D-backs team batting average. So they now get game 2 tomorrow, and we're going to talk about game 2, Merrill Kelly on the bump. We're going to talk about all that next. All right. Welcome back to the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And as you guys probably already know from the open, this is now part 2 of the podcast because this part is pre-recorded before the D-backs game. Hopefully, part 1 is sounding good and I gave a good recap. I don't know how it went because, once again, this is before the game and part 1 is post-game. But now I want to talk about game 2 of this series. And remember, I do not have knowledge of what happened in game 1. So I don't know if anyone got hurt. I don't know what happened. Okay, guys, I don't know what happened, but we can still talk about game 2 and still preview game 2 because we got enough information to talk about it because we got Merrill Kelly on the bump tomorrow. Nay, let me take that back. We got our ace on the bump tomorrow for Tuesday because Zach Gallen was supposed to start the game that you guys watched yesterday, the first game of the series against the Astros. It doesn't look like he's making his second, or it doesn't look like he's going to be starting the second game in the series against the Astros either. It sounds like he's got a cut on his thumb. That is what Nick Picaro has reported from Arizona Republic. So hopefully that's not a big deal. I mean, a cut on the thumb, I mean, I'm sure it hurts. I'm sure it greatly affects his pitching. I don't want him going out there if he's not going to be 100% effective. But considering the injury history we saw with Gallen last year and all these D-backs players over the last 2 to 3 years, a cut on the finger, I'm going to say, is a grace of God, is a positive, is something we can look at and say, hey, at least it's not season end. At least it's not season ending. At least it's not going to be a prolonged 60-day injured list stint. This is a silver lining. Only a cut on the thumb for Zach Gallen. Sorry, my nose is a little clogged right now. I'm dealing with some allergies, so making it a little hard to talk for me. But glad to see Gallen. It's nothing serious. He will get his start pushed back. So I don't know when the next Gallen start will be, but it doesn't look like it's coming against the Astros. Maybe the New York Mets this weekend. We'll see. But this will be Merrill Kelly's first career start against the Houston Astros, which is pretty surprising. I would have figured Kelly probably faced the Astros at least one time in his major league career. I mean, this is his 4th season in baseball, and I was surprised to not see any stats of Kelly versus the Astros. So this will be a pretty interesting test. Of course, I think Kelly's really good. Do I think he's an ace? I was a little hyperbolic when I said that, but of the staff right now, he's the ace. He's the best pitcher playing when Zach Gallen's not out there. So even though it's hyperbolic in terms of his standing in the entire Major League Baseball Association, in terms of just the D-back staff, Merrill Kelly is the ace. And he started to look like an ace, at least in that first game against the San Diego Padres, who no pitcher I was more glad to see shut down the Padres lineup than Merrill Kelly, because I can't get the quote burned out of my brain when Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres last season on a crossover, I don't even know which crossover it was, we've done a million, he said Merrill Kelly sucks, and I took that to heart. I hope Merrill Kelly saw that and took that to heart, because entering the game this past weekend, Merrill Kelly in his career had like a 2.25 ERA against the Padres in like 3 starts. And then he continued his domination this past weekend for his debut start of the season against the Padres, because he looked damn good. 4 innings pitched, 7 strikeouts. I thought his command was a little iffy, but his stuff looked very good, because Merrill Kelly basically gained a tick of velocity on all his pitches this past weekend. I think we're going to see that continue, because in spring training, if you go back and look at those starts, if you look at the StatCast, Merrill Kelly was hitting 94 to 95 miles per hour during those spring training games. He was almost at 95 during the start. I think his max was like 94.7. His fastball ended up averaging 93 miles per hour. I think his sinker also averaged around that. Like, you look at all his pitches, he basically gained a tick of velocity on all his pitches, at least through one start. And also through one start, if you were to compare the most used pitches this past weekend versus his most used pitches last year, the most used pitches in the Kelly arsenal were in this order: his fastball, number 1, sinker 2, curveball 3, changeup 4, cutter 5. But a little bit different this past weekend. Fastball still number 1. Then the changeup was number 2, sinker number 3, cutter number 4, and curveball number 5. I found that interesting because the changeup was a pitch he hasn't really used too much the last couple of years. It's been like number 4, number 5 in his arsenal, while the curveball has been around number 2 and number 3. Now the curveball, at least through one start, it's more at the bottom of his arsenal, while the changeup is higher in his arsenal. But again, only one start, so very, very small sample size. But what I did find interesting is his fastball and changeup was basically unhittable against the Padres hitters. I think they had 1 hit maybe combined against his fastball and changeup in that game. So those were his 2 best pitches. And he mostly went fastball and changeup against the lefties in that Padres lineup. Against the righties, he went a little bit more with the curveball and sinker. He still do the fastball and changeup, but if you look at the split, more fastballs and changeups went to lefties versus curveballs and sinkers going more to righties. So I wonder how that pitch sequence is going to even out once we face the Houston Astros, because the Padres, I like to think they're best hitters. If you look at their lineup overall, the talent, especially without Tatis, most of their talent leans toward lefty hitters. Of course, Machado's a righty, but everyone else, Grisham, Hosmer, everyone else pretty much on that team is a lefty that's of notice. But you look at this Astros lineup, it's very right-handed heavy. So I wonder if Merrill Kelly's going to change his pitch sequence and maybe go with more of the pitches he used against righties against the Padres than the pitches you're throwing against the lefties. So those fastballs and changeups, maybe he takes that changeup, maybe tones it down a little bit. And since he's going against a righty lineup, maybe he throws more hard cutters and more curveballs against these righties. Just something I throw out there. You know, I'm not in the mind of Merrill Kelly or Brent Strom on how they want to attack these Astros hitters. I'm just giving you guys the numbers. But even with that being said, even though this Astros lineup is mostly righties and Merrill Kelly's a righty, you still have to be careful because this Astros lineup this season has absolutely crushed right-handed pitching. They have an 817 OPS against righties. I think it's like below 700 against lefties. This is where the Astros lineup has taken advantage, and you still have to be very cognizant of this lineup because despite losing Carlos Correa this offseason, which Sully Baseball and I have talked about ad nauseum, this lineup is still very stacked. You still got Altuve, Bregman, Tucker, Jordan Alvarez. You got Michael Brantley. Like, they still have at least 5 legit all-star, above-average starters in that lineup that you have to be afraid of. So Merrill Kelly can't rest on his laurels in this game, but another good game by Merrill Kelly. If he has back-to-back good starts to start the year, this will be very reminiscent of the 2020 season when he came out the gates firing and not allowing earned runs and not putting guys on bases. And it will go further into my prediction for Merrill Kelly. It would hopefully calcify it, and hopefully you guys can get on my Merrill Kelly bandwagon because I said before the season I thought Merrill Kelly was going to pitch around a 3.5 ERA, and so far so good for Merrill Kelly, who has made me look pretty smart on him because I've been a believer for the last couple of years now. I'm going to continue to be a believer until the D-backs get some upgrades on their rotation. So Merrill Kelly, you keep being the ace of this D-backs staff. Now, we're going to move on to segment number 3 in just a segment. But before we do that, might as well wrap up segment number 2 with a quick discussion because Drew Ellis is being sent down to the Reno Aces. The D-backs recalled Yandy Hernandez, who they acquired on the Thursday of opening day from the Texas Rangers. And Drew Ellis, he's being sent down. I mean, he struggled offensively on the major league level this past season. He had 8 plate appearances, recorded 1 hit, an RBI, but struck out 4 times. Drew Ellis is still super raw, and I'm just not sure if he's a major leaguer. He could play third base. He could come in as a platoon guy off the bench, but is he an everydayer? I don't think so. He's probably a quad A player, a guy who should be up and down between AAA and the major league level. I don't see Drew Ellis really having a future in the MLB. Seems like a nice guy, nice frame, big build, but I just haven't seen anything in the small. I'll give it to him. Very small sample size from last year and this year, but in those small sample sizes, he just hasn't flashed for me enough at the plate to make me feel comfortable moving ahead with Drew Ellis moving forward because I don't mind Alcantara. I thought he looked decent this past weekend, and hopefully Josh Rojas isn't too far behind in his recovery, but this guy, Yandy Hernandez, I don't expect much from him. He's a switch hitter. He hasn't done much of anything on the major league level, but he's just a guy to throw out there and to see if the D-backs have anything. Like, he'll probably start today's game against the Houston Astros because whenever the D-backs acquire someone or call someone up, they like to throw them in the fire pretty much the next day, the next opportunity they get. So expect Hernandez to probably start at third base against the Houston Astros tonight. Now, I want to discuss Mike Hazen's trade history. Is Mike Hazen a good GM when it comes to trading? That's what we're going to discuss. But first, I want to talk to you guys about Built Bar because this is the time of the year I've pretty much given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars because they're protein infused, they're marshmallow infused, they're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're tasty, they're delicious. They're covered in 100% real chocolate like all Built Bars. And guess what? They're low calorie, they're low sugar, high protein, high fiber, great for that keto diet, soft and easy to chew. If you want to get your own Built Bar, guess what? You just got to go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off. And go try to get that mint brownie or cookies and cream because anything related to Oreo, I want. Built Bar. Go to Built.com. And once again, promo code LOCKed15 for 15% off. And thanks for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. Locked On MLB Prospects host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, hopefully you guys didn't hear that big sniffle. I wasn't too cognizant there, so hopefully you guys didn't hear that. 1 second. Okay, I did a quick sniffle, muted the mic though, but let's talk about Mike Hazen a little bit because I had a different topic planned for segment number 3 today. I wanted to talk about the D-backs prospects, a little Jordan Lawler, a little Corbin Carroll talk, but then I got inspired. At the last second, I got inspired because I was just scrolling through Twitter before hopping on this podcast, and I saw Jesus Luzardo had like 12 strikeouts or something in 4 innings for the Marlins today, and guess what? You know how the Marlins got Jesus Luzardo? They traded Starling Marte, a man who they had on their roster for not that very long. They had him on their roster for what, a year or something like that, a half year? I don't even know, but they traded Starling Marte to the Oakland A's. And guess what? You know how long the Oakland A's had Starling Marte? They had him for 2 months. And in that deal, the A's gave up Jesus Luzardo, who was one of the top prospects coming up, who was a really interesting young guy who has dealt with injuries. But now you look at the Marlins and they said, for having Starling Marte on our team for less than a year, for Oakland having Starling Marte for 2 months, this is the guy we got back. We got back a starter who can strike out 12, a guy who could be a legit middle to frontline starter in my rotation. What value for a guy who we didn't even plan to have in our future? And my question is, why couldn't the D-backs get value back like that for Starling Marte? Why did it have to be Czech's name, Caleb Smith, and who else? Humberto Mejia for Starling Marte? We just saw Caleb Smith start on Sunday. He can't be a starter. He has to be a reliever out the bullpen. You gave up an all-star outfielder for that? Humberto Mejia is an interesting young guy, but do I think he's going to turn to a frontline starter, an ace? I don't know about that. Hopefully a reliever. So it made me question, what is Mike Hazen's trade history? Has he won more trades than he lost? Does he at least get good value back? Or when he goes out there and acquires a player, when he acquires that player, do they actually perform well in the D-backs uniform? You say, hey, that trade was a win. So let's actually look at some trades during Mike Hazen's era and decide if Mike Hazen's even good at his own job. Because listen, I'm not a great podcast host. I try to think I'm solid, but I'm trying to get better every day. So I'm going to critique Mike Hazen, but of course there's critiques out there for me. But guess what? Being the guy behind the mic, this is my job and I get to critique other people. So let's do that with Mike Hazen. So we already talked about Starling Marte in that trade. That was an F. Caleb Smith, good reliever, terrible starter. Humberto Mejia, jury's still out right now. That is an F. Starling Marte was our best player during the 2020 season. And right now it seems like we got, 2 cents on the dollar back for him? A Shibu Inu coin on the dollar back for him? I do not know. So let's look at some other trades. Of course, we got the franchise cornerstone trade with Paul Goldschmidt when we traded him to St. Louis. And what did the D-backs got back? You guys already know. Luke Weaver, Carson Kelly, and Andrew Young. And right now, I like Carson Kelly, but the man, at the time of me recording this, because the game on Tuesday hasn't started yet, Carson Kelly does not have a hit during the 2022 season. He started the 2021 season very strong in the first half, and then he got hurt, was not very good in the second half. The 2020 shortened season didn't seem like the same Carson Kelly, and he was great during the 2019 year. Just like a Luke Weaver, great during the 2019 year, a lot of struggles since then, and I like Carson Kelly a little bit more than Luke Weaver, but we acquired Luke Weaver thinking he could be a number 2 starter in a rotation. Now we're like, can he be our 6th, 7th inning guy out the bullpen? Andrew Young, he's not even on the roster anymore, so considering Paul Goldschmidt was our franchise star, I think you have to consider that trade, a C+ at best. I know the D-backs didn't or weren't going to bring back Paul Goldschmidt, but come on. You can't get better value back than that. The D-backs acquired Eduardo Escobar from the Minnesota Twins for a right-handed pitcher, Yohan Duran, and a couple of outfielders as well. I'm not even going to name them because who knows. But basically, the D-backs gave 3 minor leaguers up for Eduardo Escobar, which I thought was a really good deal because Eduardo Escobar was a really good player for the D-backs and was like a borderline all-star basically his couple years in Arizona. Now, Duran, he did make his debut for the Twins this season, and maybe he turns out being a pretty good pitcher. But right now, I would say that trade is a win for Mike Hazen. So right now, Marte lost. Paul Goldschmidt trade loss. Escobar, win. So 2-1. Mike Hazen is currently down. How about this one? D-backs acquire Steven Souza in a 3-team deal from the Tampa Bay Rays. The D-backs also got Taylor Widener from the New York Yankees. And in the trade, the D-backs gave up Brandon Drury to the New York Yankees, and they also gave up a player to be named later to the Rays. So when I look at that deal, I guess that deal's a win because Steven Souza, even though he didn't do anything, you got Taylor Widener back in the deal, who I still think could be a pretty decent reliever for the D-backs. I'm not out on that. You gave up Brandon Drury, who ended up turning into a nothing player. So this trade might be a slight win for Mike Hazen, but it's more of a wash than anything. So right now, I'm just going to give him a wash and say the score is 2-1-1 right now. Mike Hazen is still down. How about this one? Traded second baseman Eduardo Escobar to the Brewers for outfielder Cooper Hummel and second baseman Alberto Ciparin. I don't think we're going to see that guy for another 5 years. So basically, Escobar for Cooper Hummel. We could put a TBD on this one because we need to see a larger sample size from Cooper Hummel, but Eduardo Escobar is already putting in work with the New York Mets. Eduardo Escobar was putting in work with the Milwaukee Brewers from last season. Do I think Cooper Hummel's worth an Eduardo Escobar, or will he ever be worth an Eduardo Escobar? Probably not, but we'll put a TBD on that one for now since we need a larger sample size from Cooper Hummel. How about this trade? So I get that one. We won't even count. That one won't even make the standings. How about this one? Traded Jazz Chisholm to the Marlins for a right-handed pitcher, Zach Gallen. And this one is another one I would call a wash because Jazz Chisholm, I think, is an emerging infielder for the Miami Marlins. But Zach Gallen, I think when he's healthy, is a legit frontline starter. Maybe he's not the cream of the crop number one, but if you're telling me Zach Gallen is your number two, that is an elite number two. I would love to pair Zach Gallen with another frontline starter, like someone that's at least as good as Zach Gallen, like a Marcus Stroman or something like that. So I would consider that deal a wash just because I think both players are pretty good. I can see both players make an all-star team. So I would say it's 2 wins, 2 losses, 1 win, and 2 ties for Mike Hazen as it currently stands in the standings. And then the last trade I want to talk about, because I'm only talking about the big trades for Mike Hazen during his era. There's a bunch of little trades like that Nick Heath trade or another trade where they'll trade someone for cash. Like, you think I'm going to talk about the Josh Van Meter trade? Like, that was 2 nothing players getting traded for each other. So we don't even need to discuss that. But trades where actual tangible position players or pitchers get acquired who are actually going to make the major league roster and actually contribute to a major league team. Those are the trades we're going to talk about. So I got one more I want to talk about. That is the Zach Greinke trade. And this one, Astros, of course, get Zach Greinke, and the D-backs get back JB Briscockis, Corbin Martin, Seth Beer, and infielder Joshua Rojas. I think this is another one that for now, I'll say it's a wash for now, just because Seth Beer has finally made it to the major league level and has already flashed some talent. Joshua Rojas has been a solid player for the D-backs who seems to still be unlocking his potential and still getting better and still developing. I think that's the big thing with Joshua Rojas. He's developed every season in Arizona, so you hope he can continue that. Corbin Martin pitched on Sunday. He didn't look too bad. You just hope that JB Briscockis can come back and be healthy. Meanwhile, Zach Greinke has still looked like a stud pitcher since being traded from the Arizona Diamondbacks at like the age of 45. But the pieces that the D-backs got back, you can see all 4 of them being contributors to a major league team. And when you're trading one guy and getting back 4 major leaguers back, that's a pretty solid deal. So I'll call that one a wash as well. So overall, the standings for Mike Hazen in terms of being a trader, we got 2 losses, 1 win, and 3 washes. So if I had to say, is Mike Hazen good at his job based on trading players? I would say probably not. I don't like the value he got back in probably his 2 big deals in the Paul Goldschmidt and Zach Greinke one. I like their Greinke one. I wouldn't say I like the Grinky one more. You just got more pieces back, but both of them, you didn't get back a blue chipper. You didn't get back one guy who can replace either that pitcher or position player. Jazz Chisholm for Zach Gallen, that's a wash, like I discussed. Escobar, I loved when we acquired him, but I hate when we traded him. So when I look back at most of these Mike Hazen deals, most of them aren't moving the needle for the D-backs. Most of them bring in a lot of young talent, but is any of that young talent actually going to help propel that team to the playoffs or a World Series or anything like that? I'm not too sure about it. So I think a lot of Mike Hazen moves still have the jury out on it because the players that he got back in a lot of the trades are still so young and the sample sizes are still so small. But Mike Hazen just kind of part of the bigger collection of GMs when it comes to trading star players and just making trades in general. I don't think GMs really understand the value of players. I think that's the biggest thing that I have an issue with in baseball. No one understands the value when it comes to players and trades. Like star players, what is their value when they get traded, or blue chip prospects? Like no one really understands that. In baseball and football, someone sets the market with a superstar trade, and then all the other superstar trades are really reminiscent of what that trade was. In baseball, you'll see Mookie Betts get traded for a couple of top 50 prospects. Then Nolan Arenado gets traded for like Austin Gomber, but somehow the D-backs get 3 of the top 5 prospects back in the Astros organization for Zach Grinky. If you're watching the YouTube video, I just made a few weird faces because I had like an eyelash in my eye or something. But that's my biggest issue with baseball. It's so hard to actually determine the value of players and then decide what's the best trade for that player, because I feel like Mike Hazen could have gone out there and acquired so much more talent than what he gave up. I feel like Hazen has probably given up more talent than he's acquired. And I look at some of these deals that are out there for players that are getting acquired, like the Sean Manaeas and the Chris Bassett's. I don't think they're going for a lot. I think a lot of these star players aren't going for a lot, or even the Starling Martes. If I could have got a Jesus Luzardo back, that would have been crazy. Or if I was on the other side, if I was a team acquiring Starling Marte from the D-backs, giving up Caleb Smith, a man who led the league in home runs or something at the time, like I'm not feeling bad at all when I give that guy up for a potential all-star and Starling Marte. So I feel like the D-backs are usually on the short end of the stick when it comes to just transactions in general. I mean, Shelby Miller, Yasmani Tomas, whenever the D-backs are making a big, or Bumgarner, Zach Greinke, like anytime the D-backs are on one end of a major transaction, they are usually taking the L. So I think the D-backs need to have a system for value of players, because I think that's a thing that's really hamstrung in this organization. They don't understand the value. They're willing to trade Dansby Swanson for Shelby Miller and blow up everything at that point. They're willing to pay a major contract for Yasmani Tomas. They don't understand the value of things. They're paying more than anyone else for Bumgarner, gave Greinke $200 million. They need to understand the value of players and the market so they can better help themselves. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news, coverage, and insight. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. Go make your second listen of the day. Locked On MLB with my boy and pal Sully Baseball of Locked On MLB. Might be your boy too. And as always, stay safe and stay healthy. Deuces!